Okay, I got 10 minutes. I'm going to breeze through. And since there are members who didn't listen, didn't hear the 2012 presentation, I'm going to run through overall very quickly and tell you first, and then you show the pictures. So if I ran out of time, I'll skip the pictures. Okay, so this is all the activities are done under charitable trust, and that's on my parents' name, established in 2006, and we constructed a one-story building in 2006 and added 2 more stories and a penthouse later on in 2008, I believe, 9. So we basically use the rental income plus our personal funding to carry out all the charitable activities through 2014. 2014 is a significant change. Maybe here I can say the summary of the whole presentation is that we started out the charitable trust, spent our own money, did a lot of good programs, but in 2014 we got recognized and we started a Kala Institute of Vocational Training, which got accredited, that's the closest I can say, by the central and state, which means they fund for the expenses for the training, which we're able to do a lot more. So up until 2014, we spend, now we get some rent. So, and it's done through the frequent trips, and the trustees made it possible. Everybody asks where it is. Okay, it is India relative to Europe and others, and this is where we are, almost right in the middle. And this is Mumbai, this is Visakhapatnam, somewhere here, so right in between. Delhi is up there. Looking closely, this is the village, Ankapur. If you Google it, you'll find a lot of information about Ankapur. And you can see all these little all those cheru, what do you call it? Lakes. Yeah. Thank you. So this is mostly agricultural, depending on those, and there is one recent project that was built for the water. It's all remote as you can get. So you see all of these are villages. Okay. Now just to get an idea, from there to this one is 12 miles. This is my wife's hometown. This is where I went to school, high school. This is 3 miles. So you can see a lot of villages in that area. Okay. Now this is the complex that got built, and let's see, what did we do? I'm going to run through it quickly. In 2008-9, we started out with a scholarship to the students, talented student and a needy student, provided small things like midday meal vessels and books. We organized eye camp. There are a lot of people don't even get the eye exam. So in collaboration with the Lions Club, we did the eye camp. We issued the glasses, and they get cataract surgeries done at the Lions Club Hospital. They take them there. So we provided dresses to children. In 2010 and 11, we shifted. This was good, but I think there was a compelling reason to do the drinking water projects, because there are a lot of illnesses and all of them, water is not pure. So we took on that project. Oh, what did I do?
Hit it one more time.
There you go. All right. So we brought the awareness of this water to the whole district. There was nothing before we started, and we installed 12 villages, the RO plants, 500 liters, and the whole idea is that made it available for 4 rupees for 20 liters, which you cannot touch. That's the whole idea of making it available. This club funded for 2 RO plants in collaboration with our district Nizamabad Rotary Club. And then we did some sports tournaments, and we organized some spoken English and yoga classes to the housewives. and just hoping that they get motivated and do more, but really didn't get motivated. So then we built a meditation hall at my mother's hometown. In 2012, this is when we said we needed to create jobs. Rather than donating money, little thing, we said let's pursue the vocational training. So we started with the tailoring, beautician, about 140 of them graduated. And then we conducted health camps, and we attracted 3 voluntary physicians, about my classmates. So then they were very anxious to do it, so we continued to do every week 2 days, the free clinic. And in 2013, we continued along the same lines. We had a diabetic specialty screening. Then we had an eye camp. Again, we issued over 100 eyeglasses. You'll see some of the pictures. Then we took on upgrading a elementary school. The ground is not a ground, it's all hilly and rocks and everything. Then we said, okay, I'll show you some pictures. We cleaned up, and there is only one toilet, didn't have water. So we ended up doing water for that. So then we set up 3 computer systems in our complex so the teachers can learn computer. So that didn't go too well, they didn't sign up. Okay, so in 2014, again, with the emphasis of creating the job, I went and talked to the director of National Academy of Construction, and they have a lot of resources, and we got into providing a training for the electricians. It's a skill development if they're already working as electrician, otherwise 3 months course. Resident, we provide the meals, and we actually provide, through that government agency, we provide stipend, and at the end, they also get a placement for them. So it's extremely successful. We have already finished about 6 of the 2-week skill development, or 2 of the 3-month one. Here, though, it is basically for the high school dropouts, or those who didn't finish the high school, and it's great. It just worked out very well. Now, this is the change from what we were doing on our own. Here, they pay for the food, they pay for all the books, they pay for the teachers, and I get some rent. Not very attractive, but break even is just good enough for me. So, but a lot of people get trained. Now, let's see. In 2014, where did I go? Somewhere.
That's right.
Okay, somewhere there it is. So we established a Kala Institute of Vocational Training. We registered that. And then the reason for that is that there is under charitable trust, we can provide many vocational training. So after they saw all of them, they inspected and they accredited us. So now we can provide wide variety of this training, and we get paid for the expenses, plus maybe rent. I think this one for sure I'm going to get enough rent, so we can do the health and other projects. And let's see what else. Yeah, then towards the end of the last year, we donated funds in the village to build a wedding hall, which they call Kalyana Mandapam, in the name of my parents. So that village very much liked it, because in India still have a lot of caste system. So those who have a lot of money, they have air-conditioned wedding hall, but the middle class, they can't afford to pay. So when we built this, they were all very happy. It's a huge wedding hall.
Here's some pictures to show.
Yeah. Then we're continuing with the NAC training classes, and now, since it got accredited, right now we have over 100 applications. So the school is going to start probably around 20th. So I'll be there end of the month. Okay, so these are the ones, the first time we inaugurated was my father and mother. Oh. Where? So this little kid is right there.
Just 30 seconds.
Yeah, okay. All right. Here, I'm going to show a few of them. This is the wedding hall, the constructed. This is the school ground. This is the front of the school. This is how it is. And then this is the construction. When we're done with it, here is a water for the toilet and all the leveling that has happened. And this is again where we completed the training for the electricians. I'm going to show you a lot of slides. These are the ones where we have give out the glasses. These are all the people waiting to be seen, and those are the basically tailoring and all that. I need to show this. Come on.
That's a slide.
Huh? No, that's not staying. I don't know why it's not staying.
It's a collusion between the president and the
That's kind of sad.
Very
They
interesting
meant
stuff. I
this.
think you should be a program. I think when you come back, you need to be an actual program.
Thank you.
So I would like to just segue right into our program. So Kathy, if you can come up and introduce our
First of all,
speaker.
I'm going to pass around these clipboards to table 3.
Can you?
Yeah, we haven't had clipboards for a long time, so we're kind of rusty, and the numbers don't help, so.
Thanks, Nancy. Well, just so you know, I don't actually call the guest speaker today Mr. Toilet. But that was good, Millie, I like that. So, as you know, Pat's new member talk broke a record of being short. It was 1 minute and 13 seconds, so I'll try and sum it up again. He went to Colorado School of Mines. You're taking up my time. Yes, I went to Colorado School of Mines. He has a PE in 3 states, so he can work wherever he wants to pretty much. He worked at Lawrence Livermore National Lab for 33 years. He's a great dad and a wonderful husband and friend, and he has always been a Rotarian at heart. Pat's life included several places where there was no indoor plumbing. Or if there was, the water was of questionable quality. This was ironic considering that his grandfather owned a heating and plumbing business in Santa Fe, New Mexico. We met at a expat bar on July the 4th, 1975. I was the one working on a water and sewage project. Where in Belize City there was supposed to be potable water, but there was no actual sewer system, just soap pits and buckets. You're going to get to buckets later, aren't you, Pat? So anyway, our appreciation of the consequences of not having access to clean water and appropriate waste disposal goes back exactly 40 years. So Pat has demonstrated his tenacity and drive to mobilize people to get involved in his projects. For example, his initiatives resulted in a 6-room classroom being built in August Pine Ridge in Belize. His current work on dry sanitation is full speed ahead. I do get tired of hearing about it, particularly in a restaurant. Not everybody wants to hear about composting toilets while enjoying a nice meal, but that doesn't diminish its importance to me. Last summer, he spent 2 weeks in Nicaragua and then 1 week in Belize. While he worked really hard and enjoyed it, he also missed me. He has written a memoir piece about that time, and I suggested the title, Composting Toilets, a Love Story. I think you will be surprised and inspired by what he has to say. Please welcome my husband, Pat Coyle. Yeah.
these props in just a moment.
Try it, try it, you'll like it.
So you've heard that glowing introduction, and first of all, I'd just like to say I'm not Mr. Toilet. Millie has met Mr. Toilet, and she may even have a little video of Mr. Toilet. He'll feature in one of the slides a little later here. But in addition to the get out of the slide view there. In addition to the role that, in terms of what I'm going to talk about here with world sanitation and composting toilets and overview, I'm specifically going to focus on a Nicaragua project that Kathy briefly described, and then give you a little update on the global grant initiative that we're pursuing as a Rotary initiative to follow up on that. Some of you may not know that in addition to me being in this Rotary Club, I'm also a member of the San Francisco Professionals Engineers Without Borders, where I lead our appropriate technology design team.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Okay.
We'll let you drive. So just briefly, what I want to cover today is composting toilets, give a little background, the need, the benefits, advantages, and safety considerations, some of the organizations that are involved, and an overview of the types and examples. Basically two kinds: household scale kinds of units, or units that are scaled at the size of a school, where there's either in-vault, and I'll touch on what in-vault means, or on-site composting, and then urban setting systems, where it's sanitation as a service, typically with a cartridge or removable container, and off-site composting. We'll touch on this San Francisco Professionals chapter work in Nicaragua. We'll cover that project in terms of specifics, and I'll give you a little update on the global grant status. So first of all, the need. This just staggers me every time I think about this. Over 2.6 billion people don't have access to toilets, and this has huge health implications. Open defecation and improperly maintained, overflowing latrines contaminate water and food supplies. The resultant cholera, hepatitis, parasites, and other contaminants claim lives, sicken people, and cripple economies by keeping people home from work. 1.8 million people die every year of diarrheal disease, and 90% of these are children under the age of 5. This is a big problem. There's also another consideration that's staggering to me, and Goud may know more about this in particular, but there's really a safety issue, in particular for women. Lack of toilets puts women at risk. In India, in May of 2014, it was all over the news, 2 young girls were raped, murdered, and left hanging in trees when they had gone to an open field to defecate. Had they had access to toilets, this might not have happened. So the benefits are pretty compelling from my perspective. They're clear ecological and sanitation advantages over flush toilets. In addition to addressing the basic sanitation need that it's all about, these units turn waste into compost that could fertilize crops, can complete a cycle of nutrients that rebuild soils and helps in that sense. These can reduce the cost of sewage disposal and fertilizer, and they require much less water and energy. And I'll just use the example of cell phones. A lot of developing countries have actually skipped the copper landline deal and just gone right to cell phones. And in some areas, that may be a solution where they can avoid the kind of energy and water-intensive systems that they can't afford, and perhaps go to these dry sanitation solutions. So let's just go over some of the basics in terms of safety. What do you have to do to manage poop safely? Let's just be frank about it. There's basically 2 big levers that you can use. One is retention time. If you keep this stuff around long enough, and I should mention that all of these units I'm talking about are basically urine diversion toilets. So the urine's diverted one way, the feces are left in another area, and composting material is, quote, the flush. After each use, people add some sawdust or wood ash or peanut hulls or bagasse or whatever it might be to cover the material, keep the odor down, keep the flies down, and also add composting ingredients to it. But if that compost is retained very long, and it becomes pathogen-free, or the pathogen drops way down in terms of orders of magnitude, so that it's not a safety issue. And the main consideration is that there are some pesky parasites, like roundworms, that can stick around for quite a while, unless you have to have more time in it. and also unless you can get the temperature up. And that's the other big knob that people can turn on these systems. When the temperatures are up high enough, as you can see here, when we get up to about 135, those kind of temperatures knock these pathogens down in a matter of days. The next slide will be a little better. We'll get to the next slide that I was thinking of in a moment, but this one just deals with the urine part of it. Essentially, urine from healthy people is sterile. But, on its way out of the body, you can pick up some contamination, and so that's a consideration. But the basic idea is, again, retain this urine for a little while. When it's outside and it starts to convert, you get into ammonium, you get into material, chemistry that just is not very pleasant for these pathogens, and it knocks them off. In fact, in Sweden, urine can be used on food crops as long as it's been stored for about a month's worth of retention at 20 degrees C, and as long as there's going to be about a month delay before you eat the food crops. So it's pretty benign. This is the chart I was thinking about. This just shows temperature on the vertical axis and time on the horizontal, and shows that once you get past about 100 days here, even at modest, very low temperatures, very little pathogen level left. And so this is basically the thing you have working in your advantage. Once you get out into this regime where you're essentially 3 months into it, this is pretty safe stuff. And if you've got longer time, longer better. Who's involved in this? Well, look, Bill and Melinda Gates. Now, they're not all about composting toilets, but they have a major initiative in water, sanitation, and hygiene. And they are a major player in the toilet, the toilet game worldwide. Our own WASRAG, the Water and Sanitation Rotary Action Group, is a big player in this arena. Here's Mr. Toilet. This is the one that actually Millie saw this person at the last RA conference, I believe, international conference. He featured on the cover of Rotarian magazine. He's a big champion of promoting these kinds of systems worldwide. Here's some of the examples that I just want to quickly give you an overview of. This is one of the types. This is soils work in Haiti post-earthquake when what sanitation systems Haiti had were devastated by the quake. Oxfam worked with soils, and they came in and built these public latrines that use containers. I'm not sure if I'm not
Millie,
sure if I have
grab
a
that,
little
please.
thing here, but maybe you can show me. Well, enough of digression on my part. Not a worry. You can see the blue container up here. This is typical of a cartridge-based system. These are using about 16-gallon drums, 15-gallon drums. When they're full, they're taken and hauled to an off-site composting centralized facility. The material is composted. It makes a back end that they're able to then generate compost and sell it for agricultural purposes and start to rebuild Haiti soil. Next slide, Alan. This is another example. This one is oriented to, it's sponsored through the Gates Foundation's Toilet Fair, the Reinvent the Toilet Fair. They've got a lot of work going on there. And Andrew Larson has got this kind of innovative notion with 5 of these latrines oriented towards disaster relief. They're above, you can see these pictures here, kind of a basin that these sit upon. And as one is filled up, they simply move the superstructure over to the next one and let the composting happen in the previous ones. I love the look on these women who are young Haitian women coming home from a rollout of the program that Resource, which is a nonprofit founded by a Stanford PhD student, Sebastian Tillman. They started implementing household toilet programs because while the composting latrines in the public setting were very appealing and working well, what they discovered is that families, particularly women in families, didn't really like going down to the public latrines at night. And so their toileting habits and behavior started to slide a bit. And when they came up with this system, which uses, I'll show you kind of a cartridge-based system very much like this one, they were able to get a lot better reception on that and a lot better receptivity. But in their blog, they make the point that these cartridge-based systems have a lot of potential, but we need to scale them. That there's over 748 million people living in urban settings that don't have access to toilets. And we don't just need hundreds of these toilets or thousands of these toilets. We really need to move to serving millions of people. This just illustrates the concept. Very simple and very straightforward, but there are some things about this that are worth noting. Easy to collect and transport waste safely from the community. A good toilet is a symbol of cleanliness and modernity. And in Haiti, a toilet can be anything from a modern Kohler appliance to simply a hole in the floor. And being able to stress to people that what they're being offered and have an opportunity to use is elegant, modern, and pleasant is a real selling point. It needs to be cheap, and they've got a system there that's really based around the same ingredients that this one has, which is a 5-gallon pail. Next slide, Ellen. This just illustrates the concept. Basically, they have attendants who show up with looks almost like a nurse's scrubs. He has a clipboard, he has a cell phone. He comes to a neighborhood with this little kind of a wheelbarrow cart. He takes away the full container, brings a fresh empty container and the fill or flush material. And then they get it out from these, in some cases, extraordinarily narrow little slum alleyways in Haiti's urban high-density areas out to the street where they get it on a truck, take it to Soil's centralized composting facilities, and get it working, and then close the loop with that, selling the compost to help defray the cost of the operation and to restore soils in Haiti. Here are some more examples. This is one where, again, you can see a simple little in-home toilet unit. It's being offered by X-Runner, who's offering this as sanitation as a service in Lima, Peru, where 3 million people don't have access to conventional toilets, or toilets of any kind. They're just using latrines or worse. Here's one by Clean Team in Ghana. Very similar kind of a unit, which is using these fill materials. You can see the container in the bathroom area with a little unit that's also enclosed, very similar to this one. This one by Sanergy is a little different. It's interesting. You can see again the containers are a little bigger container. What they do is they offer this as a franchise model. So there are franchisees who operate these latrines. They may not be for individual families, but a group of families, each of them will have a key to access that facility. And then they have the infrastructure and the capability to truck the material away, to compost it, to use it for, again, composting or for fertilizer purposes, and actually extract, in their case, energy from some of the products. This is a little different take. This is a local, a man who lives in Washington and Arizona, and this basically is a 55-gallon drum-based concept with polypropylene drums and a movable seat and cover that when one drum is used, they simply move the seat to the next one, cover the previous one, and they do mixing, active mixing, to get that composting to work. These are some diagrams that just illustrate some of my compatriots in Engineers Without Borders. This is a system that will be very similar to the one I'm going to show you. It's basically for a school in Ethiopia. There will be a number of these units, but they'll have this kind of little structure with a two-chamber kind of a system, and we'll see a little more about that in the next slide. While this is a busy engineering drawing, you can see basically the notion of two chambers or two compartments, this little house or outhouse above it. And the basic model here is that people will use one side until it's nearly full, cap it, switch to the other one. The other protocol, in addition to adding the flush material each time, is typically about every week or two, they take a stick and stir down the volcano. So this takes a little getting used to it. People have to be willing to do it, but I've been there and watched them do it, and they don't mind. It seems to be all right. This is just another view of that. And here are the specifics then about the project that I'm personally involved in, and that our club is going to follow up on and be involved in further. This is a project that San Francisco professionals initiated before my watch in Nicaragua, and the appropriate technology design team conceived of this notion to meet a need in that community. Starting in 2010, our chapter and the Alvarez Co-op and Alcanza, Nicaragua, and Outreach International built 10 of these composting toilets for this community of Los Alvarez, a community of about a little under 1,000 people. At that time, 95% of their latrines were in poor condition. They were flooding with water in the wintertime. This is on a steep, rocky hillside, so when they'd flood, they'd overflow. The fecal matter would run down the hill. The next house has got a well in the backyard. They'd contaminate that well. People were getting sick. The environment and the water were contaminated. So the basic status of this is that they were working great when we checked back in. People liked them, they were using them, they like the compost that they're hauling out of it. The NGO estimates they're getting about $80 worth of fertilizer out of this every every turn, if you will, every cycle when they change from one to the other and need to empty it, and that they wanted more units. So we proceeded with it. We had a very active and we have a very good NGO on the ground, Alcanza, Nicaragua. One of their staff members said, people like it, but it's $700 just for the materials for these things. It's a bit expensive. What if we cheapen up the design a bit? And so they did. And they've cut the cost by half. Here's a prototype of what that unit looks like. So we set out to build more of these, to build 14 more. Our bill of materials and our estimated costs were about $340 a copy, which again, as I say, is now down to the halfway point of what the previous ones were. And Alcanza worked with the community and the group together, did the materials procurement. Alcanza helped identify these new beneficiaries. The group themselves managed the construction and getting the beneficiaries' contribution to the project. It turned out that these families were willing to, one, pay an initial upfront kind of a contribution and then sign up to repay over a 24-month installment period like 40% of the cost of this. So they value these things. They think they're useful and they're willing to put skin in the game for it. So in the last 2 weeks of August, by July, Alcanza, Nicaragua had selected the families. By the 1st of August, the material procurement had been made and transported to the community. And in those last 2 weeks, we did the construction. And then that documentation, post-construction, is in progress now. So here's yours truly helping prepare a foundation, slab being poured, the vaults being constructed. This is a local quarried stone that's common in Nicaragua and is used indigenously to build homes, to build outbuildings throughout these communities. Sealing the vaults with a plaster coat to keep them dry or inside. Building the superstructure. Actually, these illustrate, too, where they got the costs out. Instead of concrete blocks all the way to the top, this is a lightweight wood frame wrapped in simple galvanized sheet metal. It took most of the costs out there. We did a workshop with the families. It was very successful. We had cohorts from the 2010 group who talked about their experience and were there to answer questions for the community. Even before they started in 2012, they had had a trusted community leader who had built one of these 4 years before based on seeing a pamphlet about it. He'd been using it, so when they came up with options, he was able to say, you know, I've had 4 years of experience using this and it works really well for me. And likewise at this workshop, the message from the NGO is, these are now yours to manage. You can make this work. You have trusted neighbors who've been using them since 2010. You have a friend in that community who's been using it another 4 years. They've seen it all. They've seen the sick family member. They've seen the way the baby, you know, something that goes wrong, or they've seen flies, or they've seen odor. How do you fix it? And so now there's an experience base that really makes that work. These are just a little bit of the in-progress documentation. We're doing a construction and operations manual for the NGO. We've built a CAD model from our field measurements and photographs, and here we are now in terms of next steps. EWB team that I'm involved in has been actively fundraising. We've raised about $3K through an Indiegogo campaign. We applied for and got a $7.5K grant from our chapter. We're pursuing an IBM grant for up to $5K. And more importantly to me, our Rotary Club and the NGO have partnered with the Messiah Rotary Club, which is the NGO has an office in Messiah, a city of about 150,000, to partner on a global grant, which would be with the EWB contribution and with the minimum DEF that's involved. This would be about a $37.5K kind of a project, which would allow us to do almost 80 more of these. We're seeing a little increase in the bill of materials cost, but right now that application's prepared. It's in the review process with our district, with the Messiah Rotary Club and their own district, and Rotary International. And so we had the generosity of the Castro Valley Club, who donated just enough DDF to top off what we had to get us to the 15K minimum, and there we are. So I point this out also in that this is really an ideal location for us. This is easy for our club members or other people in the district to get to. You get on a red eye in San Francisco, and by mid-morning you're in Managua, so it's not hard to get to. We've just got a few slides more in a minute. So I wanted to also make the point that this approach is not just for the third world and for developing countries. I point this out in that this unit here, which is a simple orchard supply 5-gallon pail with another one in the top of it, is actually modeled after the sewer catastrophe companion, which postulates what happens if there's a huge seismic event that just knocks out the sanitary systems for us. Well, it turns out Portland, Oregon's Bureau of Emergency Management has adopted this approach and incorporated it in part of their planning. It's one thing to have your water and your food, but where are you going to go? So let's go to the next slide, Ellen. This basic notion handles the urine separation by simply using two buckets. You use one when you just have to do that, use the other one when you got to do the other. And it's modeled after a very successful program in Christchurch, New Zealand, which responded to a big outage due to a seismic event and started using this system. Let's go to the next one. It just illustrates that they're pretty easy to make, or you can also just buy, if you're so inclined, you buy a little toilet seat kind of thing. It can sit on any 5-gallon pail. And actually, at KQED's fundraisers, from time to time, they'll have an emergency earthquake preparation kit that all comes in a 5-gallon pail with, guess what, one of these kind of lids for it. And the next slide, I think, basically wraps up here. I did a workshop at an EWB symposium in Davis. We had a lot of students build these. It was good fun, and they learned a lot about this notion. But I got actually an email from one of these young women who's getting ready to go to a project who reminded me who she was by saying, I still have the composting toilet we made there. So, we're just about there. Next slide. So for me, the takeaway with this is to keep in mind this is a big issue. It's big enough. It's right up there in the kind of focus areas that Rotary works on. And when you look at the global grant criteria and the areas of focus, sanitation is a big one. And the simple message is if you can possibly help it, don't poop in the water. Especially if you're in a developing country. And if you're interested in any of this, you know how to find me. You can email me, and I can certainly answer any questions, or I can get you a copy of this sewer catastrophe companion, which is chock full of details about how to do it yourself and the background. Lots of references if you want to look it up. So with that, we've got time for questions, or if you want to show Mr. Toilet. What does it mean to have it be composted? Well, basically, after each use, the people flush it by adding, in the case of the Nicaraguans, wood ash. In the case of the Haitians, typically bagasse, which is a sugarcane residue, or ground peanut hulls. It can be sawdust, can be any kind of organic material that's fine and that can cover the materials, which has basically three functions. Keeps the odor down, keeps the fly vector down, and it provides carbonaceous material that when it's mixed, when you stir it, you end up getting the composting process happening. So I have a video which I didn't show, which shows one of these constituent people from the 2010 cohort opening the back of one of those vaults, taking his wheelbarrow and his shovel and shoveling this stuff out, running his fingers through it and talking to the child in Spanish saying, it's just like dirt. There's no bad smell. So that's what I mean when I say it composts.
It looks just like dirt. You should have brought it in.
So would you recommend as part of our drought preparation here is maybe one way to cut down on water use?
That would actually work.
We are all creatures of where we live. And so while I do know, I have a colleague who lives in Oregon, in his household, in a communal living situation, he uses this kind of a system and they compost all their material. There are some zealots who do that in the Bay Area, but that would be a personal call. I don't.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Kristen, did you have a question?
Maybe I'll do some.
No.
Okay, Dale.
Pat, in certain climates, if you needed to process more quickly, could you just put some insulation around the bucket and raise the temperature and get the whole thing to process faster?
You could, and actually I should point out, I just learned, Dale, that in Nepal, at Everest, they have a problem. Some of you who are technical climbers and stuff know this. They've had a policy that you have to bring your human waste down. But what they've been doing is they've just been putting it in pits. But at that altitude, in those temperatures, nothing happens. And so now there's an appropriate technology design project that's going to put in digesters, which won't be composting in the same way, but they'll be adding solar collectors to collect heat to be able to heat that material so that that biomass can in fact process and get there. So the simple answer to your question is you could.
Yeah.
And if you're doing this in a northern climate, like Kathy's from Canada, you'd have to either have this composting process happening in an enclosed or tempered structure or some other way to get it to a temperature where it would be working well. In the tropics, that's typically not a problem. Bill?
What would you use for compost in your Orchard Supply homemade toilet?
What I've thought of, Bill, because I haven't got all my disaster supplies complete, but I would either use wood shavings or sawdust. If you can find that stuff typically offered as a soil amendment, and I think that would probably be not a bad bet. I think you could also use straw, like if you've got bales of straw, but that's a little longer and more fibrous kind of a thing, so it might take longer to break down.
What temperature do you have to keep it to just have it compost?
I think it varies a bit, TJ, but at ambient temperature, in the chart that I had has got some of the temperatures there. But I would say if you're at room temperature, you've got a couple of factors going on. It helps to have enough volume. I've got practitioners that I've talked to that said if you don't have a cubic meter of volume, you're just not going to get there unless it's really hot. But if you do, if you're up over that, then the biological activity that's going on and a modest kind of a temperature is going to probably do the trick. I'd say nominally room temperature. Yeah.
Okay, so that's it. So
Okay.
will you stay around for other questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Toilet's a little bit more explicit on his descriptions, so I didn't think it would kind of be appropriate to do while we're eating lunch. But Pat, so after you talk, some things you can compost later.